Trott is the chair of the panel looking into this, the chair of the review panel, and he's with me in the studio.
Yep.
And first of all, before we ask you to come back on anything you've heard there, let's just be clear about the expertise that Tim Robbins has. Can you just tell us that, please?
Yeah, Tim is a commercial airline pilot. I'm not sure whether he has ever been sort of actively involved in the management of an airline, but he's certainly a competent pilot.
Who chose him?
He was recommended to us, oddly enough, by the president of Policy and Resources. He was recommended to us by Gavin, and there was a link also through to the Chamber of Commerce with Tim. Let's be clear. Tim has been a solid member of the review panel. He's got some very strong views. He's not always able to persuade others to those views, and he's not always accurate in what he says. I mean, a perfect example is my involvement with Aurigny. My involvement with Aurigny focused between the period of 2004 and 2008, when as Treasury Minister, back in those days, we had a shareholders function. So 9 years ago, I had a close involvement with Aurigny. I've had no close involvement with Aurigny for the 4 years that I was Chief Minister. It wasn't under my diktat, or for that matter, the 4 years I was on the back benches, or the year that I've been back on the front benches as Vice President of P&R. Why? Because for the last year, the shareholders' functions are vested with the States Trading Supervisory Board. So it's important to draw the distinction between a politician who has a duty to his electorate and is properly elected to discharge these duties on behalf of P&R, and somehow some sort of vested interest or connection, which is a completely false suggestion. Now, am I as critical of the Aurigny management as some? No, I'm not. I think the Aurigny management have got a very difficult job to do, and the reason their job is difficult is because they have to please a number of different masters, and they end up doing a number of things that a completely truly commercial board wouldn't necessarily choose to do. Now, that's not being defensive of Aurigny, that is stating a fact, fact that the reviewers themselves completely accept.
Wasn't it more important that an external review was carried out?
With the benefit of hindsight...
To prevent this, what Tim Robbins dubbed a beauty pageant.
With the benefit of hindsight, I'll concede that. I think that it may well have been. But of course, everyone involved in this provided their time free. Well, admittedly, civil servants' time, there was still a cost. But we managed to produce this work without considerable extra cost. Would it have been better if it had been carried out by an external set of advisors? Well, let's take the Runway extension, for example. There have been 2 previous reports into the Runway extension, and we're no further ahead, notwithstanding that.
But the point being that you have a company that has issues. We often say it's caught between a rock and a hard place, and then the people managing the company, the shareholders, decide to investigate their own company.
Okay, let's be clear.
To come up with how on earth could this be an objective process?
Well, maybe the point, I haven't made the point well enough. The states directed the Policy and Resources Committee to carry out this review. The Policy and Resources Committee chose to set up this panel to advise the Policy and Resources Committee.
A cherry-picked panel.
A panel that
conveniently cherry-picked panel.
How could it be conveniently cherry-picked when they haven't been able to reach consensus? You could argue that by virtue of the fact that there was disagreement, that it wasn't manufactured to provide a particular outcome.
But how on earth, regardless of that, and the fact that, yes, there has been sign-off by all members of the panel, how on earth could the process have been objective? Let's take the real business world, for example. Well,
the makeup of the panel was eclectic. There's no question. But you have, in someone like Stuart Fuller MBE, you have one of the island's most successful businessmen who also, of course, spent a time as a Deputy Chief Minister of Guernsey. So he brought politics and business to the table. He's also a non-states member, but a properly elected member of the States Trading Supervisory Board. In Dr. Andy Sloan, you have one of the island's most significantly qualified economists. Everyone brought something to the table. It doesn't necessarily follow that because you've got that quality around the table, you're going to reach unanimity. And this is the bit I take exception to.
Isn't that even more surprising, though, the fact that these are key business figures who agreed to be part of something that couldn't possibly have been objective?
Well, I'm sorry, Jenny, I can't concede that. I can't see how a group of people can't be objective, notwithstanding the fact that they have differing knowledges of the subject. I mean,
because this is the states cherry-picking those people to do the review of their own company.
Well, okay. Well, then blame the amendment then, because the amendment was instructed P&R to carry out the review. It didn't make any reference to the fact that it needed to employ independent external consultants, which do, as I say, come at a cost. But I take your point. But what I'm not conceding is the fact that a group of individuals like this can't be objective. And the mere fact that we haven't reached unanimity does suggest to me a certain element of if you like, constructive tension around the table, which helped mitigate any concerns about independence.
The President of the Committee for Economic Development, Deputy Peter Ferbrache, has previously said that you've handled this report without logic and that you wanted to keep the report with the civil service for a period of time before publication. What would you say to that?
Oh, I've not heard those comments, but they seem odd for a variety of reasons, bearing in mind that Deputy Ferbrache has been involved in understanding the recommendations of the panel for a number of weeks now. So no, I find that odd.
How do you feel about that?
I wish he told me personally, and it's the first I've heard of it.
This is BBC Radio Guernsey. I'm in the studio with Deputy Lyndon Trott, who is the chairman of the Aurigny Strategic Review. More from us in just a few minutes.
The Island Games is looming, with hundreds of Channel Islands competitors preparing for what they hope will be the biggest week of their sporting careers so far.
And we'll be there in Gotland to bring you the big stories of the Games.
Coming into the arena now, the first of the Channel Islands teams.
With the key moments live as they happen on BBC Radio Guernsey.
It's a brilliant experience, they should enjoy it.
And each night you can see the action for yourself as we take you there with our special reports on BBC Channel Islands News on BBC One.
We'll have an extended local live service on our website, bringing you the results as they happen late into the night.
The BBC at the Island Games in Gotland from Saturday the 24th of June.
Let's party!
This is BBC Radio Guernsey. I'm in the studio with Deputy Lyndon Trott, who is here as the chairman of the Aurigny Strategic Review. Just explain, please, Deputy Trott, to people who might have just joined us, James Dent's involvement and the other report. Just once again, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, James Dent is an economist with a focus on transport matters. When he joined the panel, he was a citizen of Aurigny. During the review process, he chose to stand for election and was subsequently elected as the equivalent of their chief minister. So, understandably, James had a focus on issues pertaining to Aurigny. You wouldn't expect anything else, and that was why he was chosen to be a panel member, because we felt it was important that we had that focus, which again I think is an example of the desire by P&R to make the group as objective as possible. So, which is why again I refute a lack of objectivity. That you see, the trouble with that accusation is it suggests some sort of impropriety on behalf of people like Stuart Fuller and Andy Sloan as well, Dr. Andy Sloan, which of course is completely unjustified and unwarranted.
Let's have a listen to this then. James Dent has been heading up the other report from the Aurigny Strategic Review, and I recently spoke to him and asked how much difference there was in the two documents when it came to the subject of competition on the Aurigny route.
What both panels have suggested is that we have a competitively let public service agreement the candidate concessionaires would be asked to provide a fixed level of service, fixed fares. There would be agreements on the schedules. There would be penalties for non-performance, and the contract would be awarded to the operator prepared to provide the service for the least amount of money. Where there has been some dispute, or Mark Darby has brought up a problem, is he says he doesn't see how Aurigny can be the operator of last resort. Well, I mean, the Scottish model, I think, is the counter-argument. In Scotland, the Scottish Government owns the aircraft, and the concessionaire, the operator of the PSA, basically takes over those aircraft for the length of the concession. That model could quite easily be applied to the Aurigny route. So, Mark Darby, if the concessionaire did go belly up, he would have the aircraft to operate the route. And another model is that the concessionaire provides some kind of bond that gives sufficient money for the operator of last resort to come in and take over the service. So the money and the funds are there. So it's not a huge impediment.
Let's go back to Aurigny's losses. When discussing these, Deputy Lyndon Trott seemed to imply that these were all centred on its present role as an economic and social enabler, a lifeline, if you will. And the losses had nothing to do with poor operational efficiency or perhaps poor corporate decision-making, matters he didn't touch on. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have to say I disagree with Deputy Trott. I think the losses are very much centred on these other matters. Yes, poor corporate decision-making in the purchase, particularly of the second-hand Dorniers on our route to Alderney. Inefficiencies in operations when we did some benchmarking exercises as to the costs of providing the services. It seemed that Aurigny was an expensive operator. Well, we disagree.
How could things have been done better in an ideal world?
I think ideally it goes back to the core governance of Aurigny. I think the objectives that the company was set by its shareholder, which is the States of Guernsey, really, well, I think both reports used the terms not fit for purpose. There were three basic objectives, and it wasn't possible for Aurigny to actually fulfill that. They were having to offer fixed fares to Gatwick, they were having to offer a lifeline to Alderney, and they were trying to break even. You can maybe do two of those, you certainly can't do all three. So I think that both reports would like to see Aurigny become an economic enabler, and that should be the core of the shareholder objectives.
There's another disagreement over whether or not the Dorniers should be sold. What's your view on this, James?
We didn't actually say that they should be sold. We did actually say that the decision on the right aircraft might be revisited, and that's a little bit different to definitely sell them. I for one would not be wanting to tell an operator what aircraft to use. I think that's for the operator to decide. But I do like the ability to get rid of an operator who doesn't provide a service up to the standards that we need.
Are those Dorniers providing that standard of service?
No, they're not at the moment. The classic old ones seem to be forever out of the skies and in the hangar and being repaired.
Why is that, do you think?
I think it was a poor management decision to buy them.
I've also heard or been told by Alderney residents that it's not often that if the Dornier's full of people, it's not often the luggage can travel with the passengers.
Well, this is a particular problem with the older Dorniers, that they aren't able to carry a full load of passengers and a full load of luggage at the same time.
You're also taking issue with Aurigny's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Mark Darby. What's the problem here?
I'm just taking a couple of comments he made on the radio. I mentioned that he said he couldn't see how Aurigny could become the public service operator of last resort. But he, for example, also said we were recommending selling his Embraer. And he said that dropping the jet doesn't make sense. We need the seats and we only have 6 slots at Gatwick. This was a particularly strange set of comments, as it implied he hadn't really read the panel report. Our report said Aurigny should actively consider disposing of the Embraer and entering into a damp lease arrangement with another operator able to provide jet equipment on the Gatwick route. We fully recognise the need for a jet on that route, but we think that, some additional flexibility, and it might actually be cheaper in the current market to look at leasing rather than owning.
Aren't we getting into semantics here, though?
I think that the semantics was Mark Darby's making. He was saying we had said don't have a jet on that route, so he's the one playing the semantics game.
If I gave you a magic wand, James, what would you do to change the situation?
If you gave me a magic wand, I would have Alderney's runway reinstated to proper condition. I would have something akin to the public service agreement stars we've just talked about. A private sector operator, but maybe operating state-owned aeroplanes or state-owned aircraft, and the concession would last for a number of years. And we want to make it clear, that this is the model that has been working throughout Europe. I mean, this is the model that works in Norway, Finland, Greek islands, Ireland has it. The fact that Guernsey doesn't have it is a bit of a surprise, because it is a model that has worked elsewhere.
And going back to the state of the runway, I've heard it said that the Dorniers themselves are those very aircraft who are churning up the surface of the runway. Is there any truth in this?
I don't want to go too much into that, because some people say that the Dorniers are churning up the runway, and some people say that the runway is damaging the Dorniers. I mean, I think if the runway was in good nick, then neither of these arguments would hold water.
And listening to all sides of the argument, it would seem that both Alderney and Aurigny are both caught between, if you'll excuse the expression, a rock and a hard place.
I think this is very true, and I think it's particularly true over the Medivac situation. We've had a bit of a problem these last few days, and you have been reporting on it. But the worst, well, not the worst, and the worst thing is probably that there was a problem, but it was compounded by the fact that we in Alderney were never really told what was going on, and we had to learn it from second-hand sources. And we actually found out that, the politicians in Guernsey didn't know what was going on either. So there's a huge communications problem, and we've got to communicate better.
That's James Dent there, who is heading up the other report from the Aurigny Strategic Review, and I'm in the studio with the review chairman, Deputy Lyndon Trott. Goodness.
Well, let me come back at one of those points in particular. I mean, James is is consistent in his view, but let's just talk about the difference between strategic decisions made by the board of Aurigny and operational issues. James focuses in on operational matters. The Aurigny board made the decision to purchase those second-hand Dorniers. They made them on safety grounds because they no longer had confidence, as I understand it, in the Trilander fleet. There was an issue with one of the Trilanders. It caused some concerns. The only aircraft that were available at the time, as I understand it, were second-hand Dorniers. So the board
the only aircraft available the
only aircraft available that were suitable were they now, I think, have some new generation Dorniers, but they this is not really a matter for me, you see. This is a matter for the Aurigny board. But in any event, it was the Aurigny board that made that decision. To personalise it, as some people try to do around the chief executive, is what some of us found objectionable, because he, at the end of the day, is an organ of the board. Admittedly, he is the chief executive, but he takes direction from the board. It was the board that decided to buy those Dorniers for the reasons I've outlined. Now, was that a mistake? Well, on safety grounds, I doubt it. But were there some unforeseen costs associated with the purchase of those aeroplanes? Well, yes, there was. But again, I draw the distinction between the strategic decision of the board and the operational functionality, the day-to-day running of the business, following that decision. And if you like, that was, for me, where some of the conflict, conflict's the wrong word, the tension between the two groups came during the review panel. The difference between our job to analyse the strategic imperatives of the business, and others desire, if you like, to get down and look under the bonnet at the operational side of the business. And that's not what we were tasked to do, and it's not the role of an independent review panel, particularly if the terms of reference don't guide it in that direction. So that's where many of the sort of tensions existed. Throughout, of course, there was constant and relentless criticism of the management of Aurigny, which didn't help.
By who?
By a number of parties, a number of them, a number of the people resident in Aurigny, because they have some issues. And I do concede a point that James has made there about the Medivac situation. I think most believe that the communications around that could have been better. But Aurigny have explained the situation. I think they've explained it well. Their issue, of course, is around having enough crew cover. And that, you know, is an issue moving forward, because there are some. Now, let me finish this point, Jenny, because it's important. There are some who believe that this review has potentially damaged the confidence and the faith of the island in Aurigny. Let's be clear what the reviewers said. The reviewers said, overall, they agree that Aurigny's objectives should focus on supporting economic enablement, should provide the backbone of air services to support the Belwick's economy and its growth, and should provide access to affordable air travel to the UK. So the reviewers are confident, and also that it should stay in the ownership of the states. Remember, the reviewers are confident that Aurigny has a significant part to play in the air service provision to our community moving forward.
That goes without saying, though, doesn't it?
Well, I think it needs to be reiterated, because I think there are some who maybe are suggesting that this is the end of this business as we know it. I don't think that's true at all. I think it has a very fundamental part to play in that key objective of economic enablement. I mean, we want it to move more passengers to Guernsey in an environment that sees increased competition. So an example of that is around the London City route. I think the reviewers are of the view that the London City route should put out to competitive tender. It would be a good thing if there was competition on that route, but it wouldn't be a good thing if there was competition on Gatwick, because those lifelong slots are absolutely essential.
But if it could be run more efficiently with a private operator operating state-owned aircraft, if it could be run more efficiently, more effectively, more cost-effectively, wouldn't that be better?
Well, that is a question that you need to put to the Aurigny board, because that is their job. But interestingly, the week that the review was published, we also, of course, heard the announcements from Flybe with regards to Flybe's losses, which were considerable. A profit warning had been issued a little bit earlier. The reality is, and this is not me being protectionist of Aurigny, which some people I think misinterpret. The reality is, it is tricky making money in the airline business. It is particularly tricky making money when the market you're serving is suboptimal. That is a fact. It's an inconvenient truth, but it is a truth nonetheless.
When you entered the studio and we began talking this morning, you said that the review is now out, which we all know,
yep,
and that all members of the review, regardless of whether or not they wrote one report or the other, all members of that review had signed off the review.
Yeah.
Why do you think then?
They signed off the recommendations made to the Policy and Resources Committee. Yeah.
So why do you think then James Dent and Tim Robbins have come back wanting to add more information to this quite passionately in different areas?
I see nothing wrong with that, and I think this is, again, I'm finding this interview somewhat odd in the sense that this is a healthy thing. I encourage them. I said it's not an issue, the fact that we don't agree, which is why we've been completely open and transparent with both reports. Here are a set of recommendations we can all agree on, and here are the two reports. There are differences in both. But it's not a bad thing. It's a healthy thing in a democracy to have this, and I'm pleased that they feel able to air their points. What I do not like is the personalisation of some of the criticism towards a key individual within that company. I think it's improper, because the operational responsibility emanates from the strategic direction from the board. Now, where I will accept that there is some criticism is that the strategic direction from the States in its capacity as shareholder has not been as it should. And that, remember, was the genesis for this review in the first place. It's why it came about.
Given the calibre of some of the people as you've outlined on the board, why was an external consultant not even mooted, or was it?
No, at no stage do I recall any member requesting that. We did all sign non-disclosure agreements, which meant that we saw information that we might not all, otherwise see. And I think we all of us accepted that some of the management information was not as extensive as we would have liked. And I think that the board of Aurigny accept that, and there are measures in place to improve upon the quality of that.
What would you have preferred to have seen?
I would have liked absolute clarity on just how loss-making some of the routes are. For instance, a perfect example is the Aurigny collective.
So information was held back?
No, information was no. Don't try and put words in my mouth, Jenny. Information was not held back at all. Information was not available necessarily with the clarity that one would have expected.
Why not?
Well, again, that's a question that you need to put to the board of Aurigny. Who will be better placed to answer that.
But how could you have come up with a report without all of the facts?
Because it wasn't. Our job was not to look in to the losses of Aurigny. Our job was to look into its strategic value and how it could best be refined to provide a set of strategic objectives. Now, back to this
I'm sorry,
Aurigny
but
thing.
aren't the losses part of the strategic review?
Well,
aren't they as integral as anything else to this argument?
You can pretty much wipe out the losses, as I understand it, from Aurigny by no longer having them service Alderney or London City. The reality is you can't do that because we're in fiscal union with Alderney. We have a responsibility to our friends in Alderney. It is their right to expect decent air services, but they need to be affordable. Now, this is the point about the focus on Alderney. Aurigny's management will tell us that the losses are significant, and I believe that they probably are. But the absolute clarity around the extent of those losses isn't known. And of course, there will be some one-off things, such as the cost of dealing with corrosion on the second-hand Dorniers and such like. Understanding the extent of those losses, bearing in mind that the Guernsey taxpayer already subsidises Alderney Airport to the tune of, I think, approaching £1 million a year. If that figure is to arrive from the truth, somebody will correct me on it. But it's in that sort of ballpark. Understanding how significant those losses are is fundamental in underpinning a public service agreement, which is another area where James Dent and I agree on. The chances of Aurigny's air routes ever being completely self-sustainable is, in my view, remote. But who knows? A competitive tender process will go some way towards proving or disproving that point.
This is BBC Radio Guernsey. I'm in the studio with Deputy Lyndon Trott, who's the chairman of the Aurigny Strategic Review Panel. More from us in just a few seconds.
Next week on BBC Radio Guernsey, we're looking at the role of St John in the island. I'm Isla Blatchford. It starts with the breakfast programme live from the headquarters in the Rohays on Monday.
Guernsey emergency. What's the address for the emergency?
From emergency ambulances to first aid, we'll meet the people in the service.
It's nice just to be part of somebody's day. People who are sort of normally stuck at home, even if they are going to a doctor's appointment or something, it's just that interaction. It's nice to be part of that.
And if you can walk into a room when somebody's feeling at their worst and you can calm them down just by you being calm, that's half the battle right there.
The patients.
The ambulance pick me up and then they come back and collect me.
We can just call them and they'll drop whatever they're up to and come out and get us.
And the volunteers.
Hi, I'm Ben and I'm a cycle responder unit for St John.
St John Week on BBC Radio Guernsey, all next week.
This is BBC Radio Guernsey. I'm in the studio with Deputy Lyndon Trott, who is the chairman of the Aurigny Strategic Review Panel. You said that you didn't get all the information or as much clarity from the board as possible, and yet you say that you object to the personalisation of this. When you're, as the panel, working out the strategic future of Aurigny, when you're not getting the clarity from the board, isn't there an issue there?
Yes, but the issue is more one for the shareholder, which in this context is the State's Trading Supervisory Board.
Isn't it one for the reviewers as well, looking under the bonnet, as it were?
No, our review, Jenny, and this people do struggle with the difference between the strategic objectives and the operational detail. The strategic objectives are one thing. If you like, the precise detail that underpins it is another. Now, I said that I would have preferred greater clarity. It would have been better for me as part of the review to understand with as much precision as possible just how extensive the losses are associated with servicing Aurigny. Why? Because I think the Aurigny people themselves deserve a greater understanding of it. But our focus, as I say, was on strategic matters. Now, you asked me to highlight where the real areas of disagreement were, because they weren't as extensive as I think this interview may give the impression. The real areas of disagreement were around competition on the Guernsey-Gatwick route, and the impact that that competition might have on protecting those essential lifeline slots, and the length of the runway, and in particular the consequences with regards to the length of the runway on the number of rotations to London per day. One of the things that came out of the review quite clearly was that people were more concerned about frequency and reliability than they were about price. Price was a factor, but the reliability and frequency was even more important. Now, with regards to the runway, let's be clear what the unanimous view of the panel was, or what I believe everyone signed up to, and that is that the Policy and Resources Committee should commission an independent review that looks at the benefits and disbenefits of a runway extension. Now, that, of course, is currently a work stream of the Economic Development Committee, and it faces an amendment in the States to scrub it from the strategic plan, and it may be successful, because I think there are a number of us who have been through this process before who remain unconvinced that a runway extension is to our advantage. However, I would happily support an independent report on this key issue that looked at the positives and the negatives, because trust me, there are some negatives, and this is, I think, where one of the most fundamental disagreements between myself and the commercial airline pilot Tim Robbins existed, because the idea that you extend the runway, bigger aeroplanes come in and all is well with the world, I'm afraid is not necessarily the case.
Doesn't it mean that actually, I don't want to touch too much on the runway at the moment, because that's probably going to be a discussion for another day,
yeah.
But isn't any business case dead in the water because we simply don't have the infrastructure? Isn't it about building the infrastructure before even looking at any business case?
Well, the idea that you build it and they will come is one that might be the case, but just because they come doesn't mean it's in your best interests, and it is this issue around frequency that is important. Yes, you can move more people with bigger aeroplanes, but much less frequently. So it could well be that the convenience of, let's use the Guernsey Jersey route as an example. How often do you hear people in our community say they hark back to the good old days when there was effectively a taxi service by air between the islands, and the convenience of that presented, the convenience of 6 rotations a day to Gatwick, which are secure because Aurigny has ownership of those slots, and as long as it continues to use them for 80% of the time, that ownership is not in doubt, is of enormous strategic value. But it's not just the fact we can get in at breakfast and get home in the evening. It's also the idea that a businessman or a tourist can jump on a lunchtime flight. and the convenience that presents. So frequency is an issue.
I know Jersey,
and so
as
is
an
reliability.
example, Jersey, I visited Jersey myself a few days ago, and I know it's bigger. But not that much bigger.
It's considerably bigger. In fact, it's very materially bigger. The bailiwick of Guernsey has a population of about 65,000, and it's now over 100,000 in Jersey. I think it's about 101, 102,000. The difference between 65 and 101 in terms of aircraft movements is very material. Add to that a very significantly higher tourism bed stock in Jersey, and you have a market that looks very, very different to ours.
Which is what I meant by rebuilding the infrastructure first.
Apple's, if you're talking about us having an extra 2,500 beds in the island, but before, well, fair enough. But I mean, part of the review would be, okay, you extend the runway, many, many more people come as a consequence of them being ferried in larger aeroplanes. How does that sort of incentivise the business community into providing the infrastructure after the event? Because remember, this is an extremely expensive exercise, so we've got to get it right.
Well, our plane has been diverted, so let's get back on the route of the strategic review. Yeah. We've heard a lot about the processes, the arguments for various elements of the review, but what does this all mean for Aurigny passengers and for islanders in general, islanders in the bailiwick? Yeah,
well, hopefully it will mean it'll mean lower fares, and which I think is to everyone's advantage. But that may come at a cost. We'll have to wait and see. The reason I hesitate to provide you with clarity to that answer is because the review has now handed over the work to the Economic Development Committee, who are considering issues around public service agreements, and the State's Trading Supervisory Board to come back with their responses around what shape they believe Aurigny should take in the future. In conjunction with the Policy and Resources Committee, that has the overarching sort of strategic responsibility for the well-being of the community, and importantly, the Aurigny Board. The Aurigny Board have a key part to play in this now, in offering their proposals and their counter proposals around the recommendations that have been made. And it's conceivable that the outcome will look very different.
Deputy Lyndon Trott, my listeners' ears pricked up when you said that one of the few things out of all of this discussion that probably matters to the chap or chapess the other side of this radio is that fares might be cheaper. Yeah. When will we see a conclusion? When will we know what's going to happen?
Well, I would hope expeditiously, i.e. Probably by the end of the summer. But
why probably?
Well, because I'm not in control of the work streams for either the Economic Development Committee or the State's Trading Supervisory Board.
Education have been asked to come up with a plan, and they've given a date.
Sure,
why can't we see have a date for this?
They both told us that they have prioritised this work, and no doubt they will be true to their word. But the issue around elasticity of demand was another area. Price elasticity was another area that created a great deal of discussion around the panel, because, Jenny, the idea that you cut a fare by £10 or £20 and see significant behavioural change isn't true. You have to be quite a lot more aggressive with fares to bring about material change, and that has a cost.
Are you going to be looking at changing the branding? I think it was Tim Robbins who said earlier that we're not a very well-known airline. We're not able to attract that sort of business. We're not the EasyJet of the world.
No, it's not a matter for me. It is if the State's Trading Supervisory Board, who have the shareholders' responsibility, felt that there was an argument to be made.
Was that not part of the review?
They would bring it. No. Now, the review didn't. There were no recommendations to do with branding. What we do know is that branding comes at a cost. And the idea that we have Guernsey plastered all over the aeroplanes is a very good thing indeed. But I don't know enough about the marketing side of the airline business to be able to comment competently on whether the Aurigny name is a good or bad thing. What I do know is that the recommendations about interlining, in particular, are extremely valuable, because what that does is that gets you sort of into a bigger network and makes the awareness about the provision of routes of services to Guernsey available to a larger audience.
That's long been a bugbear of travel agents, as has Aurigny's computer system. But that's something we can put to the board.
Yeah. And one of the recommendations is that an audit is carried out. The audit is necessary in order to get you to that stage, as I understand it. But again, these are technical operational questions that the board, I'm sure, would be very pleased to answer.
I appreciate that, and we have, I think it's Andrew Haining in the hot seat next week, so something to listen out for. Yeah, let's go back to
a very competent individual, may I say, and we're lucky to have him as chairman of the company.
Let's go back to the point that my listeners are going to be most concerned about, the cost of fares. You said that lowering prices isn't going to get more people on the planes, but a member of the business community here has told us that's rubbish. Why would lower prices not lead to more customers?
Okay, well, let me put this to you. Okay, if you're looking at a fare structure and you can get in and out of London for £100 return one Friday, and the next Friday it's £110, does that change your behaviour? The evidence would suggest no, it doesn't. If the fares were £30 or £40 cheaper, would it change your behaviour? Probably. And it's that sort of detail that needs, I think, further refinement, so we understand precisely what levels of subsidy are needed to provide, genuine improvement to passenger numbers.
With the fiasco over the inter-island ferry service, and now this, is Guernsey becoming a laughingstock as far as its transport strategies are concerned?
I think Guernsey's transport strategy needs significant improvement. I wouldn't have accepted the role of chairman of the Aurigny Strategic Review if I didn't believe that. And I think there's much need for improvement on the sea links, but there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes, as I'm sure the president of the Economic Development Committee will be keen to advise you on.
When are my listeners going to see the result, the end of this, though? It matters to them so much.
It does. I think that they're very key issues, and I would argue that the sea links are actually more material this time of year in particular than the air links. But where, as far as getting to the right place with regards air links and in particular the strategic role that Aurigny will undertake, I think we are a lot closer now to a solution, to a conclusion.
Let's go back to something I asked you before and I didn't quite get an answer to it. Why wasn't an external consultant discussed?
Well, you've asked me that question 3 times. I've given the same answer 3 times. The decision was taken. There was no imperative, no compulsion for a firm for external consultants to be used, and the Policy and Resources Committee decided that carrying out a review in this way was a sensible starting point. You asked me, would I have, knowing what I know now, have preferred a set of independent consultants? The answer is yes, I think I probably would, but it comes at a cost. And as the president of PNR is always pointing out, one of the most regular criticisms of the states is the state's default position of going to expensive UK consultants every time we have a difficult job to do. We've done a difficult job. We haven't reached consensus. People are better informed as a result of 2 reports. That's healthy. I believe it was objective, and I think we're moving forward in the right direction. It hasn't cost the taxpayer a small fortune.
The irony is that you and I both know that members of the public criticised many states for employing external consultants, but the one area where it was very, or most crucial perhaps, this economic enabler, this lifeline, perhaps this would have been the time to have employed one, would you say?
Well, how many times do you want me to give the same answer?
I'm getting different answers from you, which is good.
Oh, I don't think you are. I don't think you are. I think that this is who knows what the STSB and the Economic Development Committee will decide moving forward. P&R has done its bit for now. It will be called upon to do more in the future. Do I think we're in a better place than we were a few months ago when this process started? Yes, I do. But it's going to be very interesting hearing from the other stakeholders, in particular Andrew Haining next week in his capacity as chairman, because they are the people who really understand in real detail the complexities and difficulties associated with running a suboptimal airline that is asked to do so many different things for so many different people with an extensive fleet variety out of necessity. It is not an easy job, and the sooner we start, we stop criticising them and support them and help that business provide the backbone for our air services in a proper, strategically directed way, the better.
The very people who you claim didn't give you enough clarity in parts of the review.
There were areas around some of the costings that were not as I would have liked, but that doesn't mean that this is a badly run organisation. What it means is that there are some improvements, and you show me any business anywhere that can't be improved.
A quick yes or no answer, because it's news time. Has Policy and Resources given equal credence to both reports?
No.
Deputy Lyndon Trott, thank you very much indeed.